I want to talk about how I've been working on having better routines. And, it's really interesting how easy it is to get to a point where you feel like you're super busy, even though you're not really adding a lot. And you're just saying, here's a few things I'm going to do every day. But then you start to realize when you discipline yourself and you actually say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a point of forcing myself to have a routine, it can be really hard and it can feel a lot more time consuming than you expected. So, for me, I just started off with a list of 10 or 15 things, right? It's like, okay, every day I'm going to play an RPG. I'm going to play a city building game. I'm going to play one of those RTS or competitive games that, that is in my library that I just don't really play very much at all. So kind of one game in every genre. I'm going to take a little bit of time and play those. Doesn't have to be a long time. Might just be 15 minutes. It might not be every single day either, but I try to do it. So at least on average, I do one of these things at least once every day. Maybe if it's the weekend, I do all of those things more than once in a single day. Then if I'm busy and it's a work day, maybe I don't do any of those things some days. I always try to get 10 miles in on the treadmill or walking around the neighborhood, something of that nature. Always spend a little bit of time watching some news or listening to the news. But then I also try to make a point to cut it off and say, all right, I've caught up on the news, because I don't need to spend all day long watching stock tickers and watching news that I already knew about. So kind of on one hand forcing myself to do it, but on the other hand forcing myself to do it less. And then things like reading a physical book, take some time, at least 5 or 10 minutes, spend some time reading a book, spend some time journaling, add an entry to my online journal, add an entry to the paper journal that I keep, that I handwrite. And I try to focus on adding, things maybe I'm grateful for or something of that nature, or maybe just a recap of what I've been doing for the day so I can look back on it and be a little bit more mindful. Like sometimes when you just say, okay, let's do a recap. What have I been doing with my day? What did I do today? It can be hard. It can be hard to actually put it into terms you'd want to share. What did you do today? Like, well, okay, I guess I laid around on the couch and looked at my phone. Okay, so you're too busy to do things you want to do, but you can look at, YouTube shorts for 2 hours straight. Got it. So that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to work on. And, I try to do a learning, like a micro learning of some kind every day. And if you haven't ever tried Khan Academy, it's definitely something I would strongly recommend. You can get the equivalent of kind of like college courses or something of that nature, but they're just short videos that you would watch and you'll probably come away learning something that you didn't know before. Even if you're not going to become an expert at something, you will learn a little bit more than you would learn if you didn't do any micro learnings at all. I try to spend some time reading physical news magazine like The Economist, because you get a well-rounded perspective on all sorts of news, including things that aren't necessarily related to the top page news that you see if you go to, say, Google News and just skim the headlines. There's analysis in there which is more grounded than what you would get if you were just consuming whatever political views people in your echo chamber have to say. So what is the end result of this? Well, what I found is, I've been doing this for probably around a month, and there's a lot of times where I can't do all of the things on my little checklist every single day, just because maybe I'm busy, maybe I'm traveling. Like I drove down to Denver the other day, and it was just pretty much all road time. I didn't have time to be gaming or writing or any of that. But I did have time to do some of those things, like listening to an audiobook is one of those things. I could do that while I drove. There's nothing that says you can't take a little bit of time to spend 5 minutes journaling, even if it's a busy, long workday. And then for things like making YouTube videos, that's another one. I always try to do one every day, but that doesn't mean I do one every day. Oftentimes, if I'm busy working, maybe I'm in a hotel or something, I don't have time or even the equipment to sit down and make some sort of a video. So I try to do several of them when I have a weekend day, when I have time to sit down and do that. Then, Sunday afternoon is perfect time for running around Tamriel, gathering random resources and talking about whatever it is on my mind. And I think there's things that are sometimes hard to do because you just don't really know what it is you want to say. Like if I say, okay, I'm going to make a YouTube video, well, I got to say, well, what is that video even going to be about? And sometimes I don't have a lot that I feel like I want to talk about. But you just don't really have anything to talk about if you let yourself be in a funk, and then you're not even trying, Like I've been thinking a lot about the importance of doing things badly. And by that I mean do something, right? Like look at this. Here's a dead animal right there in Tamriel. It's like a lemur. I have that lemur as a pet. Like that's my pet lemur, or whatever he is. Red panda maybe? I don't know. Tree panda? Like a raccoon basically. And there he is, dead, polluting the water. That reminds me, there was a time I used to like kayaking around the reservoir, and there was a dead raccoon there one day, just sort of floating in the water. I like raccoons, but here in Montana, it seems like the only time I ever see a raccoon, it's dead. In Washington State, there was a lot of raccoon everywhere, and they were just, living raccoons. You could find and feed them treats and stuff. I miss that. In any case, that was just a little bit distracting, but back to my original thing. You have to do things badly so that you can begin to build skill, right? Like if you don't do things at all because you think that maybe you're not going to be fit for the task, you're not going to do well enough, whatever it might be, well, that can be a problem. Paralysis. You just don't do anything. You just spend all your time accomplishing absolutely nothing because you're not good, or you don't have anything really to add, so you don't add anything. Like sometimes it's important just to turn the camera on and say something. If you want to be a YouTuber, or if you want to be an author, spend some time write a page in your book, because it's not going to write itself. Sometimes you have to sit there and stare at a blank page and say, I don't know what to write. And you have to turn on the video camera when you don't have anything to say. You go to work when you don't know how to do a good job. It's just because, you know what? It's better for you to show up than it is for you to not show up. And if you actually put effort into it and you're consistent, then there comes a point where it stops being so difficult. And then you start to enjoy it more, and you start to produce a little bit more true quality. But it all starts with building these routines. And when I talk about having a checklist of things that I do every day, and I try to make sure I wind up on average doing those things every single day. That isn't necessarily because I intend that for the rest of my life I'm going to have a checklist of these simple things. What I'm really trying to do is to build a habit. Because if you do something over and over again and you start to make it part of your everyday life, then there comes a point after a few weeks or a few months or something of that nature where you don't have to remind yourself every day, did I do my things that I'm supposed to be doing today? It's not really about that. You just have a lifestyle which has changed. And now you're on a different trajectory because you've trained yourself to think about life in a different way. A while ago, it was that way for me with money. Like, I was worried about money because I didn't have any and I needed to work on that. And so I really made a point to keep track of my money really, really closely. Every single week, I reevaluated my finances. I paid a lot of attention to it. And that was great. But now I look over my finances probably once a month. Because I don't have an issue with not trusting myself. I built different habits, restructured my life to where I was in a position of financial health. And then when I was satisfied that those old habits had died, then, I stopped worrying about whether I could save $5 by switching my car insurance to somebody else. I stopped worrying about whether it was going to be a bad habit for me to go to the Starbucks and get a coffee. Like, I stopped worrying about a lot of those things because I handled it and changed the habit pattern. And I think that's where, if you make a checklist or something like that, which you work every single day, and you say, I'm going to focus on my personal growth, it's not so much about saying that's going to be a thing that you do forever, but it can be a really useful tool for making sure that you are actually changing your behaviors instead of allowing yourself to always be talking about things that you want to change and then you never actually do. And things that I've noticed that have changed, for example, there's a lot of games in my Steam library. I think if something is cool and then I buy it, and then it's just somewhere down the list and I think, oh, I'll check it out at some point. And then a year goes by and I never actually even gave it an install. I didn't even play it, and things like that. Or books sitting on the shelf. I've said, I think that's a cool book, and so I bought it, but then I never even read a single page in it. And then I think, well, life is only so long. Like, I don't want to be living my whole life saying, well, one of these days I'll have time to, finish Skyrim and, or read The Lord of the Rings or something. I don't know. And never actually do it. And so getting through kind of this checklist of saying, okay, every single day I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna play a game that I haven't played before or haven't played in a while, then suddenly there I am enjoying a game that I never actually gave the time of day until now. Or reading a book that's been sitting there on the shelf collecting dust. And now, I made this checklist. I gotta do a little bit of reading time today. So I'm there on the treadmill walking along, but I'm reading this book. And then I get an idea, and you read the book, and now you're exposing yourself to other people's thoughts, and it's helping to give you, kind of get the mental juices flowing. So then when it's time to say, okay, well, I guess I'm going to make a YouTube video, or I'm going to, write something in a book or something, that I wanted to work on. Well, now I kind of have some things churning around in my head that I can work with, And none of this would be happening in a healthy way if I didn't You know, get out of bed, get off the couch, you know, start moving around, start doing something, and start triggering myself to say I am going to start. But the interesting thing, though, is it's not about saying I'm going to put a lot of time into it. You know, if I'm busy, I might just read a book for 5 minutes. That's enough. It doesn't have to be an hour, because maybe I don't have an hour. But if I say I'm going to read for 5 minutes, then next thing you know, maybe it was 15 minutes. And it starts to train those new habits. And then, even if you're just saying I'm going to do these things a little bit every day, that's enough to get you on a different path. And once you're there, then it starts to be easier and easier. And then at some point, those new things, they become the habit. You know, I've known people who were going through addiction, like they were trying to stop drinking alcohol, for example, and then they go through this kind of a withdrawal phase where they're like, oh, I you know, life sucks. It's going to be terrible. I'm never going to be happy again. I hate my life right now, you know. But then they power through it. And then after a month or so, that feeling of I can't do this turns into more of a positive habit that builds off of itself. And when you start to change your behaviors, and they slowly evolve from being a behavior that you're forcing yourself to do to a habit, then it starts to feel unnatural and difficult for you to not do those things that you want to be doing. And then it's easy. Then it's second nature, you know, that every day, of course, you're going to spend some time, you know, reading a book or whatever it might be. You know, like when I was a kid, I used to really love reading books. Then as an adult, it's a lot harder. Not because books aren't interesting. It's because, you know, it's easy to scroll on your phone for hours. Same thing with other stuff, like not gossiping about people. It's hard not to gossip about people until you give it a try and you realize that your day is better without it. And then, you know, do you really even think about other people's mischief? Not really, because you're too busy focused on doing the things that you need or want to do with your life. So I would really highly recommend that approach. It seems like it's worked a lot of good for me, continues to, and it's helped me a lot with being consistent every day. It also helps with those times when you just kind of feel like you're maybe not feeling it in life. You have these things that are on your list of to-dos. And so you can't really wallow in feeling bad about yourself or being frustrated about something that is not going your way or whatever it might be, because you're too busy focused on things that are adding value to your life. And then, you know, you wind up having a good day instead of having a day where you're, maybe wallowing in some sort of self-pity or frustration or boredom or something of that nature. In any case, never underestimate the power of taking small steps in the right direction. They certainly can add up much faster than you would expect. And just like compounding interest, good habits have a tendency to compound on each other as well, leading to better and better returns the more you practice them. So, wherever you find yourself, as always, best of luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.